August 17, 1943, 27,000 feet above Europe, 336 Boeing Flying Fortresses. Luftwaffe interceptors, climbing through morning darkness. The thunder of 1,800 Wright R. 1,820 Cyclone engines reverberates through the crystal-clear air above occupied France as Oberst Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland studies the approaching American bomber formation through his Messerschmitt Bf 109's armored windscreen. The veteran Luftwaffe ace cannot suppress his laughter at the sight of the massive four-engine Boeing B-17 Flying Fortresses struggling through the thin air at 25,000 feet. "The Americans have sent us flying barns," he transmits to his wingman, unable to contain his amusement at these lumbering giants with their ungainly silhouettes bristling with gun turrets that seem more decorative than functional. Below the German formation, 336 B-17Fs lumber eastward in tight combat boxes, their crews tensing as radar operators announce incoming fighters. Each flying fortress carries 10 50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, 6,000 rounds of ammunition, and 10 men whose survival depends on coordinated defensive fire. To German pilots accustomed to nimble RAF night bombers that scattered at first contact, these massive American machines appear almost comically vulnerable. What Galland and his fellow aces circling above the bomber stream cannot imagine is that they are witnessing the arrival of the weapon that will systematically destroy the Luftwaffe's fighter arm within 18 months. These flying barns will transform into instruments of terror as their massed 50 caliber machine guns create walls of lead that no German fighter can penetrate. The psychological transformation begins that morning when Major Curtis LeMay spots the German formation positioning for attack. The former instructor pilot from Ohio understands what his men cannot yet comprehend. Survival in the Flying Fortress requires abandoning everything they learned about bomber defense from textbooks. The B-17 represents American industrial philosophy: overwhelming firepower, redundant systems, and armor protection designed to bring crews home despite catastrophic battle damage. Among the 3,360 American airmen spread across the German sky are men who will become legends. But on August 17, 1943, they are novices in an untested formation facing the most experienced fighter force in the world. The Germans have been fighting continuously since 1939. Most American crews have been in combat for less than 6 missions. Hauptmann Johannes Steinhoff, leading Jagdgeschwader 77, positions his Messerschmitt 109-6 for a classic head-on attack that has proven devastatingly effective against British bombers. The veteran ace, with 73 victories on the Eastern Front, approaches the lead B-17 formation with complete confidence. His aircraft mounts a 20mm cannon and twin 13mm machine guns. Against lightly defended RAF bombers, this armament has proven lethal in single passes. What Steinhoff discovers in the next 30 seconds will shatter German assumptions about American bomber defense. As his 109 closes to 800 meters, the entire lead squadron opens fire simultaneously. 50 guns create a cone of destruction that no single-engine fighter has ever faced. Instead of scattered defensive fire, the Americans have created interlocking fields of fire that eliminate safe attack angles. The mathematics of destruction are loaded in those aluminum wings. Each B-17 carries 3,000 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition distributed among 10 gun positions with overlapping coverage. The armor-piercing incendiary rounds travel at 2,900 feet per second, creating a lethal envelope extending 800 yards from each bomber. Multiplied across tight defensive formations, this firepower density approaches that of naval anti-aircraft batteries. Steinhoff's first pass damages his propeller and punctures his fuel tank, forcing immediate withdrawal. His wingman, Lieutenant Friedrich Unger, presses the attack and discovers what concentrated 50 caliber fire can do to a single-engine fighter. The B-17's defensive fire doesn't just damage aircraft, it disintegrates them. Ungar's Messerschmitt breaks apart under sustained fire, the pilot never escaping his disintegrating machine. The German pilots regroup at 30,000 feet, their confidence shaken by an encounter unlike any in their experience. Radio chatter reveals growing uncertainty as squadron leaders report unprecedented defensive fire from the American formations. Oberst Galland's laughter has died, replaced by grim recognition that these flying barns possess fangs sharper than anyone imagined. The Luftwaffe's intelligence assessment of August 19th reveals the beginning of a fundamental shift in German tactical thinking. American heavy bombers demonstrate defensive coordination previously unknown in daylight operations. Concentrated machine gun fire creates zones of destruction, requiring tactical revision of attack procedures. What German intelligence cannot yet comprehend is that they face American industrial might made airborne. The Flying Fortress represents mass production, standardized training, and systematic logistics that Germany's craft-based aviation industry cannot match. The laughter of August morning will transform into terror as German pilots discover what happens when American engineering meets German fighters in the unforgiving mathematics of aerial combat. The Boeing Model 299 prototype that first flew on July 28, 1935, represented American aviation's most audacious gamble. Chief designer Claire Egvet's vision of a strategic bomber capable of reaching targets deep within enemy territory required revolutionary engineering solutions that challenged every assumption about aircraft construction. The massive aluminum structure, weighing 35,000 pounds empty, demanded 4 Pratt & Whitney R-1690 Hornet engines, producing 800 horsepower each. Seattle's Boeing plant transformed into a cathedral of industrial might, where workers assembled these flying battleships with precision that exceeded peacetime manufacturing standards. The prototype's first flight shocked military observers accustomed to modest bomber capabilities. Test pilot Leslie Tower pushed the gleaming silver giant to speeds approaching 250 miles per hour at 20,000 feet, performance that relegated contemporary fighters to near obsolescence. The Army Air Corps brass, witnessing demonstrations at Wright Field, realized they possessed a weapon that could carry war directly to enemy heartlands with unprecedented destructive power. Production demanded complete transformation of American manufacturing. Boeing's Seattle facility expanded from 43,000 square feet to over 1,600,000 by 1941. The Wichita plant, built on Kansas farmland, added another 700,000 square feet of production space. Each B-17 required 65,000 individual components, from massive wing spars machined from solid aluminum billets to delicate electrical systems containing 8 miles of wiring per aircraft. Engine production alone staggered industrial capacity. Wright Aeronautical Corporation's Cincinnati factory converted from producing 5 engines monthly in 1938 to 400 by 1942. Each R-1820 Cyclone contained 2,700 individual parts, machined to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. The supercharger systems, essential for high-altitude performance, required metallurgy techniques that pushed American steel production to unprecedented sophistication levels. Training programs expanded to match production ambitions. The Army Air Forces established specialized schools from Pueblo, Colorado to MacDill Field, Florida, where crews learned to operate the most complex aircraft ever mass-produced. Each B-17 required 10 specialists: pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, flight engineer, radio operator, and 4 gunners. Training consumed 250 hours per crew member, including 50 hours of formation flying and 30 hours of defensive gunnery practice. Lieutenant Colonel Harold George, commanding the 1st Bombardment Wing, supervised training that emphasized precision over individual heroics. His crews practiced the combat box formation that would become synonymous with American daylight bombing, tight defensive arrangements where each aircraft's guns covered neighboring bombers. The mathematics were unforgiving. A single B-17 carried 10 50 caliber machine guns. A combat box of 18 bombers created a defensive array of 180 guns with overlapping fields of fire extending 800 yards in every direction. Ammunition production required industrial mobilization on unprecedented scales. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, constructed specifically for aircraft ammunition, produced 50 million rounds monthly by 1943. Each 50 caliber cartridge contained 61 grains of powder, precisely measured and crimped into brass cases manufactured to tolerances, ensuring reliable feeding through aircraft gun mechanisms operating at -60 degrees Fahrenheit. Gunnery training consumed enormous resources. Each crew fired 3,000 practice rounds before deployment, requiring specialized ranges equipped with towed targets and gun cameras. The flexible gunnery schools at Las Vegas and Harlingen processed 20,000 gunners annually, men who learned to track targets moving at closing speeds, exceeding 500 miles per hour, while compensating for aircraft motion and wind drift. Quality control exceeded anything previously attempted in aircraft production. Each engine underwent 40 hours of ground testing before installation. Complete aircraft received flight testing that verified everything from oxygen systems to gun synchronization. The rejection rate approached 15%, aircraft that failed to meet specifications and required extensive rework or scrapping. The economic cost staggered even American industrial capacity. Each B-17 cost $238,000, equivalent to modern costs exceeding $3 million per aircraft. The total program consumed $43 billion in 1940s currency, representing nearly 3% of America's entire gross domestic product during the war years. By 1942, Boeing's production lines achieved mechanical precision that German observers, studying captured aircraft, found impossible to replicate. Standardized manufacturing meant that wings produced in Seattle fitted perfectly with fuselages assembled in Wichita. Parts interchangeability allowed field maintenance, with components manufactured months earlier on different assembly lines. The industrial achievement represented more than manufacturing prowess. American engineers had solved problems that European designers considered unsolvable. Creating heavy bombers capable of defending themselves in daylight operations while carrying meaningful bomb loads to strategic targets. The Flying Fortress emerged from this industrial crucible as America's answer to German tactical superiority through overwhelming material advantage applied with methodical precision. The dawn mist clings to Polbrook's runways as Colonel Frank Armstrong surveys his 97th Bomb Group's B-17S, preparing for their first mission over occupied Europe on August 17, 1942. Each Flying Fortress carries 10 50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, 6,000 rounds of ammunition, and 10 men trained across American skies. The psychological weight of strategic bombing doctrine rests on these aluminum shoulders as precision daylight bombing theory faces its first test. The engines cough to life in sequence, creating thunder that shakes the English countryside. Ground crews remove wheel chocks as flight engineers complete final systems checks. In the lead aircraft, pilot Paul Tibbets studies weather reports showing clear skies over the target. The marshalling yards at Rouen-Sotteville represent everything Allied planners believe about German vulnerability to precision attack. The takeoff sequence reveals engineering compromises. Each aircraft, loaded to 54,000 pounds, requires every foot of runway to achieve flying speed. The massive radial engines strain against aerodynamic drag of defensive gun turrets and armor plating protecting vital crew positions. Navigator Harry Crosby calculates fuel consumption rates, leaving minimal margins for combat maneuvering. Formation assembly over England tests. Crew coordination developed through months of training. The combat box formation, stacked from 22 to 26,000 feet, creates overlapping fields of defensive fire while maintaining bombing accuracy. Each aircraft maintains position through constant throttle adjustments, burning precious fuel to match formation variations. Radio discipline remains absolute as German monitoring stations track American formations. The Channel crossing marks the point of no return. German radar operators track the approaching bomber stream, while flak batteries traverse guns toward predetermined coordinates. Luftwaffe fighter squadrons scramble from airfields across northern France, their pilots confident in tactics proven against RAF daylight raids. Ball turret gunner Staff Sergeant Robert Altman spots the first German fighters climbing toward the formation from below. The Messerschmitt 109 seconds represent everything German tactical doctrine has perfected. Fast, maneuverable, heavily armed, flown by pilots with combat experience dating to the Spanish Civil War. What the German interceptors encounter contradicts their experience with British bombers. The B-17 formations maintain tight defensive spacing despite fighter attacks, their gunners coordinating fire through interphone systems, allowing instant communication between crew positions. Top turret gunner Technical Sergeant Michael O'Brien tracks a 109 making a beam attack, his twin 50 calibers swiveling to match the fighter's approach angle. The engagement lasts 37 seconds. German fighters, expecting bombers to scatter under attack, discover formations that tighten rather than disperse. The massed defensive fire creates zones of destruction German pilots have never encountered. Lieutenant Klaus Weber, flying his Fokker-Wulf 190 inches, a head-on attack against the lead squadron, faces 50 guns firing simultaneously. His fighter absorbs multiple hits before reaching firing range, 50 caliber rounds puncturing his engine, cowling and severing control cables. The psychological impact on German pilots proves immediate and profound. Radio intercepts record urgent transmissions, requesting reinforcements as squadron leaders report bomber formations, fighting back with unprecedented coordination. The American defensive fire doesn't merely damage attacking fighters, it destroys them through concentrated firepower, overwhelming individual aircraft attempting traditional attack profiles. Major Adolf Galland, monitoring the engagement from headquarters, realizes the implications immediately. His fighter pilots face American formations that have transformed defensive gunnery from individual marksmanship into collective firepower. The B-17's defensive concept represents industrial warfare applied to aerial combat, coordinated systems, defeating individual skill through overwhelming material advantage. The bombing run over Rouen-Sotteville demonstrates American precision doctrine. Bombardier Thomas Ferriby tracks the marshalling yards through his Norden bomb site from 24,000 feet. The bomb bay doors open with mechanical precision, revealing 12 500-pound bombs. The release mechanism drops ordnance at intervals designed for maximum target destruction. The return flight reveals the B-17's most crucial characteristic, survivability. Aircraft damaged by flak and fighter attacks continue flying despite damage that would doom lighter bombers. Structural redundancy built into every major component allows continued operation with multiple system failures. Tail gunner Staff Sergeant John Anderson counts 17 flak holes in his section, yet the aircraft maintains formation and airspeed. Mission statistics reveal both promise and problems. All aircraft return to base, validating the Flying Fortress concept of survivability through armor and defensive firepower. Bombing accuracy approaches theoretical predictions, with 60% of ordnance falling within 1,000 feet of the aiming point. But fuel consumption exceeds estimates, limiting future mission ranges without modifications. German intelligence assessment acknowledges a fundamental shift. American heavy bombers demonstrate defensive capabilities requiring complete revision of fighter tactics. Concentrated firepower and formation discipline create unprecedented challenges for conventional interception methods. The Flying Fortress has arrived in European skies, carrying American industrial philosophy transformed into aerial warfare doctrine. The theory of precision daylight bombing faces its ultimate test above occupied Europe, where German fighters must adapt to an enemy that fights back with mathematical precision. The ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt represented everything Allied intelligence believed about German industrial vulnerability, NSA. A critical choke point where destruction could cripple tank and aircraft production across the Reich. Major Curtis LeMay's lead formation of 183 B-17Fs approaches the target through increasingly violent fighter opposition on August 17, 1943, their defensive fire creating walls of tracers against the Bavarian sky. German pilots discover that attacking these formations requires tactics entirely different from those used against RAF night bombers. The morning briefing at Thorpe Abbotts revealed the mission's strategic importance with clinical precision. Intelligence officers studying reconnaissance photographs identified 23 separate buildings housing precision ball-bearing manufacturing equipment. Each factory produced components essential to German war production, from tank transmissions to aircraft engines. The destruction of Schweinfurt's industrial capacity could theoretically reduce German military effectiveness by 30% within 6 months. Flight preparation consumed 4 hours, as ground crews loaded each B-17 with maximum fuel and ordnance. The modified fuel systems, incorporating additional wing tanks, extended range to nearly 1,500 miles while reducing defensive ammunition loads to 4,000 rounds per aircraft. Crew chiefs supervised installation of 12 500-pound general-purpose bombs, their delayed action fuses designed to penetrate factory roofs before detonating. Formation assembly over England demonstrated American precision flying developed through months of combat experience. 364 Flying Fortresses arranged themselves in combat boxes stacked from 24 to 30,000 feet, each group maintaining defensive spacing that created overlapping fields of fire. Radio silence remained absolute as German monitoring stations tracked the massive formation. German fighter response escalated beyond anything previously encountered over Europe. Oberst Walter Dahl, commanding Jagdgeschwader 300, coordinated attacks from 16 separate airfields stretching from Holland to Bavaria. His pilots, veterans of Eastern Front combat, approached American formations with tactics refined through 3 years of bomber interception. Head-on attacks, executed by flights of 4 Focke-Wulf 190 seconds, concentrated 20mm cannon fire against lead bombers. What German pilots discovered contradicted their assumptions about American defensive capabilities. The B-17 formations, rather than scattering under concentrated fighter attack, maintained tight cohesion while increasing their rate of defensive fire. Ball turret gunner Staff Sergeant Robert Johnson, suspended beneath Memphis Belle, tracked German fighters through coordinated fire control that eliminated traditional attack angles. The psychological transformation became evident as German pilots reported unprecedented defensive fire concentrations. Lieutenant Hans Philipp, flying his Messerschmitt 109-6 against the lead combat box, faced 50 heavy machine guns, firing in coordinated bursts. His aircraft absorbed 14 hits in the initial pass, puncturing fuel tanks and severing control cables, forcing immediate withdrawal despite achieving no damage to the bomber formation. The bombing run over Schweinfurt demonstrated American precision doctrine under extreme combat conditions. Lead Bombardier Captain Charles Overacker, peering through his Norden bomb sight from 26,000 feet, tracked the primary target, while German fighters attacked from all directions. The synchronized bomb release executed despite violent evasive maneuvering, placed 60% of ordnance within 500 feet of designated aiming points. German flak defences created walls of exploding steel that damaged every aircraft in the lead formation. The 88mm guns, positioned in carefully planned batteries, fired proximity-focused shells designed to detonate at predetermined altitudes. Flying Fortress structural strength proved decisive as aircraft absorbed flak damage that would have destroyed lighter bombers while maintaining formation integrity. The return flight revealed both the B-17's survivability and the mounting cost of daylight precision bombing. Aircraft, limping back to England, carried battle damage, documenting the intensity of German defensive efforts. Tail gunner Technical Sergeant William Lawley counted 37 flak holes in his section while maintaining defensive fire against pursuing fighters. Casualties mounted as damaged aircraft struggled to maintain altitude and airspeed. Memphis Belle, veteran of 24 previous missions, absorbed catastrophic damage to her No. 2 engine and hydraulic systems. Pilot Captain Robert Morgan, fighting controls that responded only intermittently, managed to maintain formation through crew coordination, exemplifying American training standards. The statistical analysis revealed both the mission's success and its prohibitive cost. Bombing accuracy achieved 85% effectiveness against primary targets, with significant damage inflicted on critical ball-bearing production facilities. But crew casualties approached 20%, with 36 aircraft lost to fighter action and flak damage. German fighter losses totaled 42 aircraft, with 28 pilots killed. Major General Ira Eaker realized that precision daylight bombing faced sustainability challenges despite tactical success. The mathematics of attrition warfare indicated that current loss rates would eliminate effective bomber strength within 18 months, without tactical modifications or escort fighter support. The Schweinfurt missions established the template for strategic bombing's ultimate test: whether American industrial capacity could sustain losses necessary to achieve strategic objectives. German pilots, initially confident in their ability to defeat unescorted bomber formations, discovered that American defensive firepower and aircraft durability created challenges requiring complete revision of interception tactics. The Sperry Ball turret suspended beneath Memphis Belle's aluminum belly represents American engineering's answer to fighter attack from below. Technical Sergeant Harold Loch, cramped in the rotating sphere 25,000 feet above the North Sea, controls twin 50 caliber Brownings through a sophisticated computing site that calculates deflection automatically. Each gun position on the Flying Fortress creates overlapping fields of fire designed to eliminate dead zones where German fighters might attack safely. The technical specifications of B-17 defensive armament represent American industrial engineering applied to aerial warfare. Each aircraft carries 10 M2 Browning machine guns, twin guns in nose, dorsal, ventral, and tail positions, plus single weapons in waist positions on each side. The synchronized firing system allows gunners to coordinate fire through electrical interphone connections, creating zones of destruction extending 800 yards from each bomber. Ammunition logistics reveal the scale of American industrial commitment to defensive firepower. Each 50 caliber gun receives 425 rounds of mixed ammunition types: armor-piercing incendiary, armor-piercing incendiary tracer, and standard ball rounds. The total ammunition load weighs nearly 900 pounds per aircraft, requiring specialized loading equipment and precise weight distribution. The M2 Browning machine gun represents 40 years of American weapons development perfected for aircraft installation. John Browning's original design, modified for aircraft use, fires 750 rounds per minute with muzzle velocity of 2,900 feet per second. The weapon's reliability in sub-zero temperatures exceeds anything in German service, with jamming rates below 1%. Gunnery training programs consume enormous resources as the Army Air Forces develops specialized schools across the United States. The Flexible Gunnery School at Las Vegas processes 2,000 gunners monthly through courses, emphasizing deflection shooting against targets moving at closing speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour. Students fire over 3,000 practice rounds each, learning to compensate for aircraft motion and target movement. Staff Sergeant Robert Altman, ball turret gunner aboard Yankee Doodle, describes the psychological challenges. You're hanging in space in a plexiglass ball, watching German fighters coming straight at you. The computing site does the math, but you still have to track them through the turn. When they open fire, their cannon shells look like golf balls floating toward you. The computing gun sight represents advanced technology, giving American gunners decisive advantages. The K-14 gyroscopic sight automatically calculates lead angles for targets maneuvering at various speeds and directions. Gunners need only maintain the target in their reticle, while the sight's mechanical computer adjusts for deflection, range, and aircraft motion. German fighter pilots encounter systematic accuracy that eliminates traditional evasive tactics. Crew coordination transforms defensive gunnery from individual actions into collective firepower. The interphone system allows instant communication between all gun positions, enabling coordinated fire against attacking fighters. When German aircraft approach from multiple directions, gunners can concentrate fire from several positions simultaneously, creating walls of lead that no single-engine fighter can penetrate. Technical Sergeant Michael O'Brien, top turret gunner with 15 combat missions, explains defensive tactics evolution. Early missions, we fired at everything that moved. Burned through ammunition, couldn't hit anything. Now we coordinate with other positions. Ball turret calls the approach. I track through the turn. Waist guns pick up the departure. The psychological impact on German fighter pilots proves as significant as physical effectiveness. Hauptmann Wilhelm Lemke, Jagdgeschwader 2, reports after engaging B-17 formations. The American defensive fire creates zones we cannot penetrate. Traditional attack profiles result in aircraft destruction before reaching effective firing range. Formation attacks have become suicidal. German intelligence analysis of captured B-17 defensive systems reveals technological sophistication that German manufacturers cannot match. The electrical synchronization system, computing gun sights, and ammunition feed mechanisms represent production capabilities requiring industrial resources Germany lacks. Oberst Adolf Galland's assessment proves prophetic. American bomber defensive systems demonstrate industrial capacity we cannot counter through tactical innovation. The ammunition itself proves superior to German expectations. American 50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds penetrate German fighter armor at ranges exceeding 600 yards. The incendiary compound burns at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, igniting fuel systems and aluminum structure. German pilots discover that single hits from American heavy machine guns inflict damage requiring major repairs. Manufacturing quality control ensures reliable operation under extreme conditions. Each gun undergoes 100 hours of testing before installation, including function checks at temperatures down to -60 degrees Fahrenheit. Ammunition production meets specifications, requiring 99.8% reliability. Combat box formations position aircraft to create overlapping defensive zones where attacking fighters face concentrated fire from multiple bombers simultaneously. A German fighter attacking the lead aircraft encounters defensive fire from up to 6 different B-17 seconds, creating probability zones where survival becomes mathematically impossible. The transformation of aerial combat represents American industrial philosophy applied to warfare. German fighters, designed around pilot skill and aircraft performance, face coordinated systems that reduce combat effectiveness through overwhelming firepower rather than superior maneuvering. The Flying Fortress defensive concept proves that American engineering can compensate for pilot experience through technological superiority. Unteroffizier Klaus Weber's hands shake as he adjusts his Focke-Wulf 190's gun sight, preparing for another head-on attack against the American bomber stream over northern France on September 15, 1943. The psychological toll of facing massed 50 caliber fire has begun affecting even veteran Luftwaffe pilots, as stories circulate of comrades disintegrating under concentrated defensive fire. Meanwhile, 20-year-old ball turret gunner Sergeant Michael O'Brien from Brooklyn fights claustrophobia and terror while tracking German fighters, knowing that survival depends on split-second reactions. The mental strain on German fighter pilots manifests in ways their medical officers struggle to understand. Dr. Hans Eppinger, Chief Medical Officer at Jagdgeschwader 26, reports increasing cases of what ground personnel call JBO fever, physical symptoms appearing when flying fortresses are reported approaching. Experienced pilots who faced Spitfires and Hurricanes without flinching now develop tremors, nausea, and cold sweats before missions against B-17 formations. Oberst Joseph Priller, commanding Jagdgeschwader 26, witnesses the psychological transformation during morning briefings at Abbeville Airfield. His pilots, veterans with hundreds of combat missions, sit in unusual silence when intelligence officers describe approaching bomber formations. The casual banter that once characterized pre-mission preparations disappears, replaced by tense discussions of ammunition loads and escape routes. Inside the Flying Fortresses, American crews face their own psychological battles. Staff Sergeant Robert Johnson, tail gunner aboard Alabama Exterminator, describes the terror. You see them coming from miles away, getting bigger and bigger. You know they're aiming for you specifically because the tail gun is alone back there. When they open fire, the whole aircraft shakes like it's coming apart. The claustrophobic conditions inside defensive gun positions amplify psychological stress. Ball turret gunner Technical Sergeant Harold Loch, cramped in his rotating sphere for 8-hour missions, experiences panic attacks that threaten his ability to function. The medical officer at Polbrook documents increasing cases of gunner's syndrome, acute anxiety reactions triggered by confined spaces, and extreme vulnerability. German fighter pilots develop superstitions, attempting to cope with mounting casualties. Lieutenant Friedrich Unger carries his girlfriend's photograph in his oxygen mask, believing it provides protection against American gunfire. Others refuse to fly certain aircraft or change attack approaches based on lucky charms. These behaviors, previously unknown among Luftwaffe personnel, indicate profound psychological strain. The sound of massed 50 caliber fire creates lasting trauma in German survivors. Hauptmann Wilhelm Lemke, shot down twice by B-17 defensive fire, suffers recurring nightmares featuring the distinctive hammering of American machine guns. His combat report describes the psychological impact. The sound is unlike anything in our experience. You hear it in your sleep weeks after combat. American bomber crews develop coping mechanisms for extended combat operations. Navigator Lieutenant Charles Crosby maintains detailed journals documenting each mission's psychological challenges. His entries reveal the mental burden of repeated exposure to flak and fighter attacks while maintaining professional competence. The close quarters create intense bonds that help sustain morale despite mounting casualties. The rotation system affects both air forces differently. American crews face 25 mission tours before returning to training assignments or stateside duty. This policy provides psychological relief through definite endpoints, allowing crews to count down remaining missions. German pilots serve until death, injury, or war's end, creating open-ended stress that compounds with each combat encounter. Medical officers on both sides document physiological effects of high-altitude combat stress. German flight surgeons report increased heart rates, elevated blood pressure, and digestive disorders among pilots facing B-17 formations. American flight surgeons observe similar symptoms in bomber crews, particularly defensive gunners who face direct fighter attacks while trapped in confined positions. The psychological warfare extends beyond individual combat encounters to broader strategic implications. German commanders realize their pilots' declining morale affects overall tactical effectiveness. Squadron leaders report increased instances of pilots aborting attacks prematurely, claiming mechanical problems that subsequent inspections cannot verify. Combat fatigue manifests differently in the two air forces due to organizational structures. American crews benefit from standardized rest periods, recreational facilities, and psychological support services. German pilots face continuous operations with minimal support systems, creating cumulative stress that reduces combat effectiveness. The contrast amplifies psychological advantages provided by American technological superiority. Intelligence officers analyze captured German documents revealing psychological breakdown within Luftwaffe fighter units. Combat reports increasingly mention pilots breaking off attacks due to mechanical problems that ground inspections cannot confirm. Squadron commanders report difficulty maintaining morale as casualties mount without corresponding success against American formations. American bomber crews, despite their own fears, gradually develop confidence in their defensive systems. The knowledge that coordinated firepower can destroy attacking fighters provides psychological advantages that compound technological superiority. German pilots face the demoralizing reality that traditional attack methods result in aircraft destruction without inflicting corresponding damage on bomber formations. Operation Argument, the concentrated assault on German fighter production facilities, represents the climactic test of strategic bombing theory, as over 3,000 heavy bomber sorties target aircraft factories across Germany during 6 days in February 1944. The Luftwaffe's response strips fighters from all fronts, creating the decisive air battle that American commanders have sought since arriving in Europe. Major General Jimmy Doolittle, commanding the 8th Air Force, coordinates the largest aerial offensive in history, while German High Command commits every available fighter. The mission planning reveals American industrial capacity applied to strategic warfare. Intelligence officers identify 68 primary targets across 12 German cities, from Messerschmitt factories in Regensburg to Focke-Wulf assembly plants in Bremen. Each target receives detailed analysis of structural vulnerabilities, defensive positions, and production capacity. The bombing loads include delayed action fuses designed to complicate German repair efforts for weeks after initial attacks. Weather conditions over Central Europe create the operational window Allied meteorologists have predicted. The high-pressure system promises 6 consecutive days of clear skies over German targets, essential for precision bombing accuracy. Flight crews, briefed on their mission's historic nature, understand that Big Week represents the culmination of 2 years of daylight bombing doctrine development. The German response mobilizes every available fighter aircraft from Norway to Italy. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring issues orders stripping coastal defenses, Eastern Front units, and training squadrons to concentrate maximum fighter strength against the American bombers. Over 800 German fighters, representing nearly 60% of the Luftwaffe's total operational strength, prepare to defend German aircraft production. The first day's operations, February 20th, demonstrate the evolution of B-17 defensive tactics. Colonel Curtis LeMay's lead formation approaches Leipzig through fighter opposition, exceeding anything previously encountered. German pilots, flying their final missions before fuel shortages ground their squadrons, attack with desperate determination. The coordinated defensive fire from American combat boxes creates walls of lead that destroy 42 German fighters, while losing only 21 bombers. Oberst Adolf Galland, commanding German fighter operations, realizes the strategic implications as reports arrive from across the front. His experienced pilots, irreplaceable veterans of 4 years of continuous combat, fall to American defensive fire at rates that eliminate entire squadrons within hours. The mathematics of attrition favor American industrial capacity, which can replace losses faster than Germany can train new pilots. The bombing accuracy achieved during Big Week validates American precision doctrine under demanding conditions. Bombardier training enables crews to place ordnance within 500 feet of designated aiming points, despite violent, evasive maneuvering and concentrated flak. The Norden bomb site proves decisive in destroying specific production buildings while minimizing collateral damage. German industrial damage assessment reveals sustained precision bombing effectiveness. The Messerschmitt factory at Regensburg loses 60% of its production capacity when American bombs destroy critical machine tool workshops. Assembly line disruption extends beyond immediate physical damage, as skilled workers flee to air raid shelters, disrupting production schedules for weeks. Luftwaffe pilot casualties during Big Week exceed losses for the entire previous year. Flight training schools, stripped of instructors to fill combat squadrons, cannot replace experienced pilots at necessary rates. The average combat experience of German fighter pilots drops from over 300 hours to less than 60, as veteran pilots die faster than training programs can produce replacements. Technical Sergeant Robert Johnson, ball turret gunner with 23 missions, describes Big Week combat intensity. The German fighters came at us like nothing we'd seen before. Wave after wave, no breaks between attacks. But our defensive fire was working. You could see them breaking apart when they hit our crossfire. Captured German documents reveal command-level recognition of strategic defeat. Oberst Werner Mulder's final report to Luftwaffe headquarters acknowledges that continued operations against American bomber formations will eliminate German fighter strength within 6 weeks. The recommendation to withdraw fighters from daylight operations represents abandonment of German air superiority doctrine. American crew morale, initially strained by the mission's intensity, improves as German fighter opposition diminishes. Navigator Lieutenant Charles Crosby documents the transformation. Day 1 was hell. Day 6 was almost boring. The Germans barely came up to meet us. You could see the war changing from the cockpit. Manufacturing statistics compiled after Big Week demonstrate strategic bombing's effectiveness. German fighter production drops 40% in March 1944, never recovering to pre-bombing levels. American bomber production, unaffected by enemy action, increases 20% during the same period. The February offensive establishes American air superiority over Europe through direct destruction of German defensive capacity. Luftwaffe fighter strength, reduced from 800 operational aircraft to fewer than 300, cannot contest subsequent bombing operations. The strategic bombing doctrine proves that industrial capacity can defeat tactical excellence through sustained, systematic pressure. Major Georg Peter Edder's Me-262 jet fighter screams through the B-17 formation at 500 miles per hour on March 28, 1945. Its 430mm cannon spitting destruction for the brief seconds available before incredible closing speed separates attacker from target. The Luftwaffe's desperation has spawned increasingly radical solutions: rocket-powered interceptors, air-to-air bombing, even ramming attacks by specially trained volunteers. Each innovation represents German engineering brilliance applied to an increasingly hopeless situation. The Messerschmitt Me-262, operational since July 1944, represents German aviation's most advanced achievement. The twin Junkers Jumo 004 turbojet engines produce 1,800 pounds of thrust each, enabling speeds approaching 540 miles per hour. The concentrated armament of 4 Mk 108 30mm cannon fires explosive shells capable of destroying heavy bombers with single hits. Yet operational limitations prevent the revolutionary aircraft from achieving decisive results. Fuel consumption rates plague Me-262 operations, as each sortie consumes synthetic fuel equivalent needed for 12 conventional fighter missions. The turbojet engines, operating at temperatures exceeding 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, require rare metals unavailable to German industry. Engine life expectancy averages 25 hours between major overhauls, creating maintenance nightmares for ground crews. Pilot training deficiencies compound technological challenges facing German jet operations. Lieutenant Hans Muttke, one of fewer than 50 qualified Me-262 pilots, describes the transition. The jet has no propeller torque, no engine vibration, just smooth acceleration. But it takes 3 miles to turn around, burns fuel like a bonfire, and the guns jam if you pull more than 4 Gs. The rocket-powered Messerschmitt Me-163 Comet represents German desperation transformed into engineering extremism. The aircraft, powered by volatile rocket fuel producing nearly 4,000 pounds of thrust, climbs to 30,000 feet in under 3 minutes. Armed with twin 30mm cannon, the interceptor approaches bomber formations at speeds exceeding 600 miles per hour, creating targeting problems conventional gunnery training cannot solve. Hauptmann Wolfgang Spetter, commanding the only operational Me-163 unit, reports the aircraft's reality. The Comet is a flying bomb that occasionally shoots down bombers. The fuel explodes if you land too hard. The fumes poison pilots during extended flights. We've lost more aircraft to accidents than combat. Ramming tactics, officially designated Sonderkommando Elbe, recruit volunteer pilots willing to sacrifice their lives, destroying American bombers through direct collision. Major Klaus Hager trains pilots to survive ramming attacks by targeting bomber tail sections while bailing out at the last moment. The psychological preparation proves as challenging as flight training. The April 7, 1945 ramming mission demonstrates both German desperation and American defensive effectiveness. 180 volunteer pilots, flying stripped-down Messerschmitt 109 seconds, attack a formation of 1,300 B-17 seconds. The coordinated ramming attacks destroy 8 bombers while losing 123 German fighters. Technical Sergeant Michael O'Brien, top turret gunner with 34 missions, describes encountering German jet fighters. You hear them before you see them, a screaming sound like nothing else. They come straight through the formation so fast you can't track them, but they can't slow down to aim properly. The psychological impact on German pilots proves as significant as technological limitations. Major Rudolf Sinner, veteran fighter pilot with over 200 missions, reports demoralization affecting experienced aviators. We have aircraft that can outrun anything the Americans possess, but we lack fuel to fly them, experienced pilots to employ them effectively, and time to develop proper tactics. American bomber crews, initially concerned about jet fighter threats, discover that German technological superiority cannot overcome systematic disadvantages. The jet's high fuel consumption limits engagement time to minutes rather than sustained attacks. Maintenance requirements ground aircraft for days between sorties. Intelligence analysis of German desperate measures reveals systematic collapse of Luftwaffe effectiveness despite technological innovations. Jet fighters average 1 operational sortie per week due to fuel shortages. Rocket interceptors achieve kill ratios below conventional fighters due to brief engagement windows. Ramming attacks consume irreplaceable pilots faster than they destroy bombers. The contrast between German innovation and American production capacity illustrates industrial warfare's fundamental mathematics. Germany develops advanced technologies requiring rare materials, extensive training, and complex maintenance. America produces reliable conventional systems in overwhelming quantities, using abundant resources. Major General Curtis LeMay, observing German technological desperation, recognizes the strategic implications. They're throwing everything they have left at us: jets, rockets, suicide attacks. But they can't sustain any of it. Every desperate innovation accelerates their collapse by consuming resources they can't replace. The final phase of German air defense demonstrates how technological superiority becomes irrelevant without supporting industrial capacity. Advanced aircraft require fuel, trained pilots, maintenance facilities, and spare parts that Allied bombing has systematically destroyed. The formation of B-17Gs approaching Dresden in February 1945 encounters no fighter opposition. The Luftwaffe exists now only in scattered remnants, hidden on remote airfields without fuel. Staff Sergeant Robert Altman, veteran of 35 missions, surveys empty German skies through his top turret and realizes the strategic bombing campaign has achieved its ultimate objective: complete elimination of the Luftwaffe as an effective fighting force. The statistical transformation reveals the magnitude of American industrial victory. From August 1942 through May 1945, the 8th Air Force alone flies over 300,000 bomber sorties, dropping 700,000 tons of ordnance on German targets. The human cost proves enormous: 26,000 American airmen killed in action, 28,000 wounded. Yet German losses exceed even these devastating numbers. Intelligence assessments document the complete collapse of German air power. From peak strength of 4,000 operational fighters in early 1944, the Luftwaffe maintains fewer than 300 airworthy aircraft by war's end. Pilot training programs, stripped of instructors and fuel, graduate aviators with less than 30 hours of flight experience. The average combat life expectancy of German fighter pilots drops to 11 missions. Major General Curtis LeMay, analyzing strategic bombing results, recognizes the campaign's vindication. We proved that industrial capacity, properly applied, can defeat any tactical advantage. The Germans had better pilots, more advanced technology, and interior lines of communication, but they couldn't match our production rates, crew training programs, or logistical support. The factory production statistics tell the story of industrial warfare's decisive nature. American aircraft production peaks at 96,000 units in 1944, including 12,000 four-engine bombers. German production, despite heroic efforts, never exceeds 40,000 annual aircraft while suffering constant disruption from Allied bombing. The quantitative advantage compounds qualitatively as American crews arrive with superior training. Technical Sergeant Michael O'Brien, completing his 35th mission over Berlin, reflects on the transformation. When we started, the Germans owned the sky. Every mission was a fight for survival against pilots who knew their business. Now, we fly wherever we want. The few fighters that come up are kids who can barely fly, let alone fight. The infrastructure destruction extends beyond aircraft production to encompass the entire German aviation industry. Aluminum smelters, destroyed by precision bombing, cannot provide raw materials for airframe construction. Synthetic fuel plants, systematically targeted by Allied bombers, eliminate aviation gasoline production. Ball-bearing factories, repeatedly bombed, cripple engine and aircraft component manufacturing throughout the Reich. German engineering personnel acknowledge the impossibility of maintaining aircraft production under sustained bombing pressure. Dr. Ernst Heinkel, designer of Germany's first operational jet fighter, admits the fundamental disparity. American bombers attacked our factories faster than we could repair them. Each raid set back production for weeks, while the Americans replaced their losses within days. The psychological impact on surviving German pilots proves as devastating as material losses. Oberst Johannes Steinhoff, one of the few ace pilots to survive, describes the final months. We were sending children to die in obsolete aircraft against formations of experienced American crews flying superior machines. Every sortie became a suicide mission. Air superiority enables systematic destruction of German ground forces and transportation networks. Without fighter cover, German armies become vulnerable to constant air attack. Railway systems, previously protected by fighter screens, suffer paralysis as Allied aircraft destroy locomotives, bridges, and marshalling yards without interference. Allied bomber crews witnessed the Reich's industrial collapse from their cockpits. Navigator Lieutenant Charles Crosby documents the transformation. February 1945, flew over the Ruhr today. Every major factory is gutted, every rail yard destroyed, every oil refinery in ruins. You can see the war ending from up here. The strategic bombing campaign's success validates pre-war theories about industrial targeting while exceeding optimistic predictions. German war production, which should have peaked in 1945, instead collapses to levels below 1942 output. Critical materials shortages, created by systematic bombing, cascade through the entire German economy. Captured German documents reveal the extent of industrial paralysis by war's end. Albert Speer, Reich Minister of Armaments, reports to Hitler that aircraft production has ceased, synthetic fuel output has dropped to 2% of requirements, that doesn't take PURs, and ammunition manufacture can supply only defensive operations. The final B-17 missions over Germany in April 1945 encounter no opposition beyond scattered anti-aircraft fire. German fighter bases stand empty, their runways cratered by repeated bombing attacks. The aircraft that once defended the Reich lie as twisted wreckage in factory ruins or abandoned on airfields without fuel. The strategic transformation from German air superiority in 1943 to complete Allied domination demonstrates industrial warfare's fundamental mathematics. Superior technology and tactical skill cannot overcome systematic destruction of the industrial base that sustains modern military forces. The Flying Fortress has proven that American engineering and industrial capacity can defeat any enemy through sustained systematic pressure. At the United States Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, a restored B-17 Grams sits among other legendary fighters, its aluminum skin gleaming under fluorescent lights. The placard lists specifications and battle honors, but the real story is told by a small display case containing spent .50 caliber shells and gun camera film showing a Focke-Wulf 190 disintegrating under concentrated fire. Below the display, a quote from an unnamed German pilot captures the transformation. "We laughed when we first saw them, fat, ugly American bombers that couldn't turn, couldn't climb, couldn't fight. We stopped laughing when we realized they didn't need to turn or climb." Former Luftwaffe ace Adolf Galland, interviewed at a reunion of German and American pilots in Phoenix during 1985, acknowledges what German intelligence had concluded. The Flying Fortress represented not just a bomber, but a system combining massive industrial production, comprehensive crew training, and technological innovation that Germany could never match. His assessment captures the complete reversal. We made a terrible mistake in 1943. We saw this big heavy bomber and laughed. We were the ones who didn't understand. The strategic bombing campaign's final statistics reveal the magnitude of American industrial achievement. From 1942 through 1945, American factories produced over 12,000 B-17 Flying Fortresses, each requiring 65,000 individual components manufactured to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. The Boeing plant achieved production rates that German observers found impossible to replicate using their craft-based manufacturing systems. Technical Sergeant Robert Johnson, veteran of 35 combat missions as a ball turret gunner, reflects on the transformation. When we started flying missions in 1942, every German fighter pilot seemed like an ace. They knew every trick, every tactic. By 1945, the few that came up were kids who could barely keep their aircraft level. We buried them under an avalanche of aluminum and lead. The human cost validates the campaign's strategic objectives while revealing warfare's terrible mathematics. 26,000 American airmen died in B-17 seconds over Europe, their average age 22 years. German fighter pilot casualties exceeded 40,000 killed, wounded, or missing, representing complete elimination of an entire generation of aviation professionals trained before the war. The B-17's defensive armament proved decisive in achieving air superiority through systematic destruction of German fighter strength. The coordinated fire from massed 50 caliber machine guns eliminated traditional fighter tactics based on individual pilot skill. German pilots, trained in personal combat excellence, could not adapt to industrial warfare where coordinated systems defeated individual heroism through overwhelming material advantage. Manufacturing statistics demonstrate American industrial mobilization's unprecedented scale. Peak production reached 12 B-17 seconds daily from all factories combined, each aircraft representing 47,000 man-hours of labor and 35,000 pounds of aluminum. The ammunition production supporting these aircraft consumed 25 million 50 caliber rounds monthly, manufactured to specifications, ensuring reliable operation at -60 degrees Fahrenheit. The strategic transformation from German air superiority in 1943 to complete American domination by 1945 illustrates industrial warfare's fundamental principles. Superior technology and tactical brilliance cannot overcome systematic destruction of the industrial base, sustaining modern military forces. The Flying Fortress entered combat as an object of German derision and ended the war having achieved complete air superiority. Major General Curtis LeMay, analyzing strategic bombing results, recognizes the campaign's vindication. We proved that precision daylight bombing could achieve decisive results when applied with sufficient force over sustained periods. The Germans had better pilots and more advanced technology, but they couldn't match American industrial capacity applied with mathematical precision. Intelligence analysis of captured German documents reveals the extent to which American bombing achieved strategic objectives. Aircraft production, which should have peaked in 1945, instead collapsed to levels below 1941 output. Pilot training programs graduated aviators with insufficient experience to survive combat against veteran American crews. At war's end, German fighter bases stood empty, their runways cratered by repeated bombing attacks. The aircraft that once defended the Reich lay as twisted wreckage in bombed factories or abandoned on airfields without fuel. The pilots who had laughed at American flying barns were dead, captured, or fleeing across devastated Germany. The thunder of massed 50 caliber machine guns had spoken, and the sky belonged to America. The Flying Fortress had proven that industrial warfare favors the nation with unlimited production capacity and strategic patience to apply overwhelming force through sustained operations that achieve decisive results through accumulated pressure